Hey, what is up guys? I'm KBHD here, and this is your first look at the brand new LG G7 ThinQ. Now that whole long new name, LG G7 ThinQ, is kind of terrible in my opinion, so I'm just gonna call it LG G7 for the rest of this video, and probably forever. So I'd actually describe this G7 kind of like a V30, but updated for 2018. So I don't know if you remember the LG V30, one of the most underrated phones of last year. Basically, this feels like a very reactive phone in 2018, meaning it doesn't really do anything new that we haven't seen before, but a lot of the things it does, it has its own little LG twist on it. So on the outside, it's looking familiar, right? This one's silver, but there will be 4 colors. It's glass on the back and then aluminum around the rails. Yes, it does have wireless charging, and yes, it is really reflective, but not as bad as some others. The biggest difference is now it actually has a real power button on the right side instead of just using the fingerprint reader on the back as a power button. And on the other side, you'll probably notice the volume rocker and then, oh wait, look, another button. That is the Google Assistant button. Now that's interesting. That's actually, I'm surprised it's the first time we've seen a dedicated button for Google Assistant in a phone, not counting the squeeze feature of the Pixel. That's not a button. So you can press it to open the Assistant or hold down and it'll let you ask certain things with custom voice commands, kind of like a walkie-talkie, but that's all this button does. So it's kind of like the Galaxy S9's Bixby button, but better because it's Google Assistant. But here's the thing, I didn't just roast the Bixby button because Bixby is bad, it was because the button also wasn't remappable. It was either on or off, you couldn't make it do anything else. This Google Assistant button on the G7 is also not remappable. And I have to stay fair and say you should also be able to remap that button, not just because it's an assistant button, because it's an extra button on a phone. You should be able to do whatever you want with it. So you'll be able to enable it or disable it through the software, but no one wants a useless extra button on their phone when it's disabled, so I encourage LG to allow us to remap it to a custom software button. You can push a software upgrade that lets us do that. Take the lead on this one. Be the people's champ. Anyway, around to the back, the camera's orientation for the dual cameras is now vertical, very 2018, putting dual cameras like this, but they still keep the flash and the laser autofocus outside of the camera module. I kind of like it better when they put everything inside the same module, but that's just me. It feels cleaner that way. Either way, G7's camera bump is really small. It's in the middle of the phone. It's not bad. And then the cameras themselves might be the standout distinguishing feature of this phone. So 2 16 megapixel cameras, an f1.6 aperture, and the one is still a super wide angle instead of a telephoto. So LG's sticking to their guns this year, but this time it's a slightly less extremely fisheye. Still wide angle though. No photo or video samples with the final software available yet though. That's something we're gonna have to test for the full review. And that goes along to say too with things like battery life on that 3000 milliamp hour battery, and just general performance through LG's software on top of Android Oreo. But I think we kind of know what we're getting ourselves into here. With Snapdragon 845 and 4 gigs of RAM, it's probably pretty good. So G7 is ticking all the boxes. It's built well, it's IP68 water resistant, it has a micro SD card expansion slot. If you look at the bottom of the phone, yes, it absolutely still does have the headphone jack, backed by that impressive 32-bit quad DAC, so LG stays committed to that premium audio experience. And that little speaker down there, it looks the same, but they are much louder. LG says it's about 40% louder. From hearing it, I'd say it's definitely a lot louder, but what's actually more interesting is you can feel it vibrating and moving the whole phone. The speaker uses some of the space inside the phone and it acts as a literal resonance chamber, and you can actually put your hand up at the bottom of the phone and feel air moving out of it, which is really impressive, but also just holding it, it's vibrating your hand. It's actually pretty cool. So feeling the bass actually move air from a phone is impressive, but the sad part is there's no stereo speaker action happening, so this tiny speaker grill is it, and it's really easy to block accidentally, sadly. But then this main attraction of the phone is up at the front. It's got the display, a 6.1 inch 3120 by 1440 IPS display with a notch. So this one's interesting. It's a big display with small bezels, obviously, so that's great for 2018. There's a bit of a small chin, more than some other phones, but not so big that it's like a huge problem for me. But the interesting part of their choice is to go with an LCD panel instead of an OLED. The biggest benefit to this was their super bright mode. There's a little toggle in the brightness slider, which is basically when you're outdoors, you can boost up this display's brightness by a lot. And I can definitely say it's effective. Samsung also kind of has something like this, and it's also an OLED display. but nobody can do panels quite like Samsung. So as long as what LG is doing here is effective, I don't mind. It works. I got to use this phone outdoors for a bit, as you can tell, and it looked pretty good to me. It's also colorful, it's definitely sharp, and it gets bright, and it has this nice little notch up at the top, just in time for 2018. LG in the settings calls it a second new screen for some reason, not really sure why, but there's a software feature that lets you hide the notch, of course, if you're not into that, but then also even decorate it a bit if you want to, but then you can just see the notch again, so I don't really see a point to doing that. But the bottom line is it's here. Android P, when it comes out, will have some other apps working better with the notch. I suspect that before it happens, this phone will have some problems the same way the Huawei P20 and other early Android phones with notches did. But that just about covers it for the hardware. Like I said, pretty familiar to the V30, but a lot of the other new differentiating things with this phone are, of course, in the software department, and a lot of them have to do with, you guessed it, AI. It kind of feels at this point like it's a buzzword that everyone's throwing around. Everyone's got some new AI feature in their new phone, but it is here. So the main place you'll see it in this G7 is the camera. Now in the camera app, there's a portrait mode button, and there's also this huge new AI cam button. So if you open that up, you'll get this different mode that identifies and recognizes up to 18 different situations, similar to what we saw with the P20. So it has a pet mode, a food mode, a sunset mode, a fruit mode, all that stuff. I'll have to play with it more to see how it actually adjusts the photos once it identifies what it's taking a picture of, but one thing it does is sometimes suggests 4 filters based on what mode it's in that you might like based on what's in the photo. I don't know, it seems like very early, like no one really knows exactly what they want to do with AI in the camera, but that's what it's doing now. There's also a new super bright camera mode, which kind of acts like a night mode in other cameras, really brings up brighter exposure in nighttime or dark shots. I'm crossing my fingers that works well. And there's a portrait mode on both the back-facing and front-facing cameras with adjustable blur, which is cool. But of course, all this will have to be tested for the full review. And I think this will be a really interesting phone when it actually does come out. A lot of this feels similar and familiar to people who have owned LG phones. If you've owned an LG phone before, this will be right at home. Even if you've owned a Samsung before, with all the features they pack in and the settings, it'll feel right at home plus a notch. It feels like LG's biggest challenge is standing out from the pack in some way. None of the features I really went over in this video about this new phone kind of break it away from the pack and give you a reason to get this phone over Galaxy S9 or even Pixel 2 or iPhone or whatever. It's still definitely unique with the wide-angle camera lens, I'll give it that. And having a headphone jack with the quad DAC, that's pretty unique. But outside of that, it's pretty tough. I think this phone is probably going to fly under the radar again. We'll see. But let me know what you think. Now that you've seen LG G7, is this enough to sway you and maybe move to it over another phone? Or is it just kind of blending in the way it is for me right now? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Either way, thanks for watching. Talk to you in the next one. Peace.